Hi, I'm Professor Liu here tonight with art prof teaching artist Huang. Welcome to our video where we critique artwork in movies. Today we are talking about the movie The Grand Budapest Hotel. If you would like to grow as an artist but you cannot afford an art class, we've got everything you need here: tutorials, critiques, career advice. Get started by subscribing to our channel and ringing the bell to make sure you don't miss out on anything. Grand Budapest Hotel was a Wes Anderson film, and it was made in 2014, and it's got a huge cast of celebrities. There's Ray Fiennes, Edward Norton, Bill Murray, Adrian Brody, Willem Dafoe. I mean, everybody in Hollywood, it seems, is in this movie. Kat, why don't you tell people the premise of this movie for people that have not seen it before? Because actually, the painting that we're going to be talking about, the title of it is Boy with an Apple, actually plays a major part in the plot of the movie.
Right, sure. So the summary is basically it all takes place in the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a hotel in the movie, and it focuses on the concierge of the hotel named Gustav and a bellboy named Zero. And a very rich widow dies, and she bequeaths upon Gustav this very famous painting, Boy with Apple. And this whole film surrounds the adventures of Gustav and Zero trying to procure Boy with Apple with the widow's son, trying to get the painting back from Gustav. And also, Gustav is ultimately charged with the murder of the widow, so they also have to deal with that huge problem. And that's basically the whole film.
It's a pretty big mess. They, at one
Yeah.
point, are like sliding down a hill trying to chase Willem Dafoe. It's a really funny,
Yeah.
quirky movie. I hadn't seen it before.
So
I
weird.
literally finished watching it about 2 hours ago. But those of you who are watching right now in the chat, tell us if you've seen this movie, if you like it, what's your take on it, if you like the painting we're going to talk about, which is titled Boy with an Apple. And hello, we already have Hamza and Ray and Alicia in the chat. Thanks so much, you
Hello.
guys, for joining us. What I think is really cool about this painting is actually a lot of thought and effort went into the creation of this painting, which, wow, is such a difference versus Titanic, which Jordan and I critiqued a little ways back, and wow, they did not work very hard on that artwork. But this piece was actually created by a British painter named Michael Taylor. And I'm showing some of his paintings that he does in his own studio practice. And I have to say, I like his work quite a bit. I feel like in a lot of his portraits, he's got some pretty ambitious compositions. I feel like he's got lots of diagonals and all that good composition stuff. And so he's actually a really good choice, I think, because he has the technical skill as far as realism goes. On the other hand, I also think if you look at Michael Taylor's paintings, they do have a little bit of a distortion to them, which to me makes a lot of sense given that Boy with an Apple is intended to be modeled by the Italian Mannerist painters, also the German Renaissance. So he was a great choice as an artist. Kat, what is your take on Michael Taylor's paintings?
I really enjoyed his paintings when I looked at them. They always seemed to me just a bit, maybe a little bit grotesque. Like they didn't always portray the person in such a flattering lighting. Like sometimes you'll see, I don't know, like the bags under someone's eyes, maybe the way they smile, the wrinkles aren't very attractive or whatever. And it seemed like Michael Taylor was just rendering what he saw, or more like, I don't know, like rendering what he felt. Maybe he felt that in that moment maybe the person seemed a little bit off-putting or something. But I think that translated really well with Boy with Apple because, I mean, a Wes Anderson film, I don't know if anyone has seen many of them, but they're always just a little bit odd. Not just a little, extremely odd. And I think that really suited the painting because the painting itself was just serious enough for you to believe that it might be a masterpiece, but always there's something a little bit off about it. And I think that Michael Taylor's sort of style very much suited the painting and the film.
Well, I read in this interview about Wes Anderson and Michael Taylor, the process they went through to commission the painting, and Wes Anderson described the result of the painting. He wanted to be not very funny, just a bit funny.
It's funny.
It's
Yeah.
perfect. I mean, that's sort of, to me, embodies Wes Anderson's movies, is that they're
Yeah.
quirky, they're a little odd, something's not quite right, they're just a little crooked. And maybe
Yeah.
that's what people like about his films.
Mm.
Hello, 10,000 Crows and Sarah W. Hamza is saying, I love the painting, the epitome of Dutch portraiture, and I love the way the widow had a ton of sculpture, paintings, and prints in her home. Yeah, Kat, do you
Yeah.
remember? After Ray finds Gustav, takes Boy with an Apple off the mantle,
Yeah.
he steals it, he puts up this really suggestive Egon Schiele painting in its
Yeah, yeah.
place.
I thought what was even funnier in that scene though was that it wasn't actually Gustav who put up that painting. It was Zero, the bellboy, who just like didn't know anything. Like he's an immigrant. He just freshly arrived at the country. He's like, let's put this Egon Schiele in place of the priceless boy with Apple.
I just thought that was so wonderful.
Yeah.
Ashley is saying in the chat, I think it's the eyes. He paints them in a strange way. Yeah, they're a little bit uncanny. And also, if you look at Michael Taylor's other pieces, the eyes feel a little too big. There's
Yeah.
something very off about them, about the proportions. I mean, I think he pulls it off. I think he does very
Mhm.
well with the distortion. I don't look at it and start scrutinizing the anatomy or anything like that. He's very consistent about his style, but I would agree. I think it was very effective in Boy with an Apple. And so, actually, one of the things that Wes Anderson talked to Michael Taylor about was all of these different references from art history. So, for example, he was having Michael Taylor look at these Mannerist paintings by Bronzino. So, Kat, you pulled this slide. Can you explain a little bit for you what's the relationship between this and Boy with an Apple?
Can you explain the painting because I cannot see it right
Oh,
now?
sorry. It's the one of the mother who's wearing this like super elaborate pattern dress, and she's got this creepy little kid next to her.
Yeah. Okay, wait, I remember which one you're talking about. I pulled up that one because first of all, it's like a little bit of an off-putting portrait. I think all portraits are most portraits are a little bit odd because you know that these are people in history. They actually sat there in real life to get painted and they're dead now. And you see this sort of imitation of them. But another reason why I pulled it up was because of the clothing, like how elaborately embroidered her gown is versus Boy with Apple, all the little details in there as well. And I just wanted to show that usually these paintings are meant for like richer people. And I think Boy with Apple also was like a good translation of that, showing sort of the time history it came behind.
I mean, I feel like in the Bronzino portrait, the dress is almost more the main spectacle than the woman and her child. I feel like the
Right.
dress has such a incredible elegance and presence to it. That's really great. And I actually really love these weird Lucas Cranach paintings. This is one called The Elder Saint Anne in a Mountain Landscape.
Oh
And
yeah.
I just think that the face on this one is so bizarre. And in some ways, when I go back and I look at Boy with Apple, I don't know, I sort of want just a little bit more oddness to it. It's tough because I feel like we're talking about very subtle minor changes, but I do feel that Boy with Apple, it's a little bit held back compared to his regular studio practice. I mean, granted, it was a commission.
Yeah. I would agree with you, but I'd also say that I mean, I think it's doing a great job already. I would like maybe push the oddness a bit, but you know how difficult it is to draw in someone else's style? It's extremely difficult. You don't like I can give an example. I was doing a commission for a friend and he just wanted me to draw hands tying knots, right? And I thought, oh yeah, no problem. Black and white style, cartoony, I can do that. Ink drawing, no problem. And I drew it and he's like, oh, I want them to be a little bit more like stupid. Like I want the hands to look a little not so articulated, more like they're scribbled on, more like kids' drawings. And I was like, that's really hard. And I kept drawing and drawing and drawing. I was like, I just can't get it right. So it's extremely difficult to paint in someone else's style. And I think that Michael Taylor already has done a good job stepping in that direction. But I do agree, maybe some more changes could happen. Like, um, all of the older paintings that I shared for the slides, they always just look a little bit doll-like and off in that sense. So maybe if Michael Taylor could make the face seem a little bit more artificial, maybe that would help. Such as, I don't know, like I don't know why, but everything's really thin in paintings. Does that make sense? Like, carefully painted eyes, carefully painted noses, carefully painted mouths, and maybe that could be translated in Michael Taylor's painting in like maybe making the skin more smooth. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Well, this Hans Holbein painting we're looking at, I mean, her skin does not look like skin. It looks like
Yeah.
a doll face or something. It's a very odd surface. So I definitely can see that. Ray is saying in the chat, I never liked Philip Pearlstein's figures who look slimy to me. These paintings are charming. The distortions seem metaphorical, like the objects in the portraits. Jug of water equals vessel. Yeah, you know something? I have to say, as much as we are going to critique Michael Taylor's piece a lot in depth, he really did a great job considering the circumstances because I'm somebody who has done portrait commissions in the past. And like Kat said, pleasing your client is so hard because they
Yeah.
only know what they don't want. They can never explain to you exactly what it is they're looking for. And in the article that I read, it sounds like Wes Anderson was extremely specific about what he wanted. And Michael Taylor said that the process took 4 months to do. And so this was not something that happened really quickly. In fact, here we have a picture of Michael Taylor, and he actually did this from life. Like he had this kid, Ed Munro, who was from like a local ballet school. He had him wearing the outfit. He was posing in some historical manner, and he really made him hold the apple with his hand in
Yeah.
that position. I'm like, that is so hard on your model. Like, Kat, would you ever ask your model to do that pose with their hand?
I would be kind and have them do it in periods. Like have them hold it there and then eventually just move on to the face for another part and then have them rest.
Well, because I was going to say there's ways around making your model go crazy. Because
Yeah.
what I used to do when I did portrait commissions is I would do at least 50% of the portrait was from the beginning part of it was from just the photos. So I would like block in the big shapes, I would get the basic colors in, and I wouldn't really bring in the model to sit until I was ready to look very carefully at the colors and get all the subtle shifts in
Right.
there. And so I was reading that article. I was like, dude, you don't need him there the whole time. Like, I think you could have given him a little bit of a break. Let's talk a little bit about the clothing, though, because they actually said that they were looking at some of the bodices from this film in 1998 starring Kate Blanchett from Elizabeth. And it sounds like Wes Anderson was very specific that he wanted the fur, he wanted the velvet, the patterns, and the bodices. And so, even though it sounds like it was definitely not a fast process, he sounds like a really smart client. I was reading this article thinking, dude, you really knew very closely what you were looking for, which is rare in a client, I would say.
Yeah. Well, he's Wes Anderson. But I definitely agree. I think the first thing I noticed, okay, well, to be fair, the first thing I noticed in this portrait was the hand. The next thing I noticed was the elaborate clothing. And it's just so many different textures going on. Like there's even lace there. You know how hard it is to paint lace?
Why do you think I've never painted it?
Yeah, same. Yeah. But yeah, the lace, the I don't know, like the gold silk, embroidery, the fur, the velvet, it's all there. And they all seem a little bit different. So kudos to Michael Taylor. There's even been like thought in the velvet curtains behind the boy and the velvet cloth on his sleeve.
And do you
Well,
notice how the red in the sleeve, it's like a little bit more cadmium red, and the
yes.
drapery in the background is like a little bit more alizarin crimson. Like that's such a slight,
Mhm.
subtle change of red, but the contrast is very effective. He did a really great job with that.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is when I was doing portrait commissions, you know, in art school, you're drawing naked people 99% of the time. Like when
Yeah.
I got out of school and I was doing these commissions, a all of a sudden I was painting these couches with super elaborate patterns, and I had to paint
Mm.
rugs and people's clothes. It's a lot of work to do all that
Yeah.
stuff. So I think he did a great job. The one thing that I think fundamentally could have been better, I do wish that the lighting was a little
Yeah.
bit more prominent. What do you think?
I mean, I agree, but at the same time, looking at the older portraits back in the day, the lighting wasn't that obvious either. Like there weren't that many dramatic shadows and stuff. If you look at the weird one with the weird name, the Koyup last
Oh
name,
yeah, let's look. How do you pronounce this? Albert
I don't know how to
Kuyup?
pronounce it. Koyup?
Cup? I don't know.
But apparently he was like a famous Dutch artist, and I pulled him up because Michael Taylor said that his portrait of Boy with Apple reminded him of like the Dutch masters. Um, Actually, no, never mind. I feel like there's a direct light source in these.
I mean, if anything, I would say, at the very least, pump up the contrast.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, it could be that this is not a great representation of the painting because actually, if you go back and you look at some of the slides of the painting in the movie, it's very, very different than what you actually see in our slide. Let me see. Why is it always the last slide that I'm looking for that has the painting in it? Okay. Oh, no, wait. Here we go. Let's get the still. Here it is. This is such a funny shot because there's like all the hotel keys like lined up on the left and the right of the painting. It's like, and by the way, there's this like Vermeer-esque painting in the middle. It's like very strange. Ashley is saying in the chat, there's a painting in the Louvre of two women holding their nipples. I can't remember the name. Why is his hand in the same position? Ashley, I think I know which one you're talking about. And actually, I was thinking about it the other day, not for this critique, but for another one. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't know the name of the artist. What am I supposed to Google? Art history breast pinch? Like, I had no
Yeah,
idea what to
it's
Google
so
for that
famous.
image. You cannot believe some of the things that you end up Googling for the sake of art history slides. But yeah, so if you look at this slide, which is Gustave actually reaching for the painting, it does look a lot darker. So I sort of feel bad trying to critique the contrast, knowing that maybe the image isn't so fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think also the image that we chose here isn't that representative of the whole thing as a prop because the frame is an important part of the painting too. And actually the frame went through a whole process in order to be like paired with the painting and be approved by Wes Anderson as well. So I really think this painting goes along with the frame, and I think we should also look at it in context with the frame.
Well, and the frame also is what carries this. Well, I'm not going to tell you guys if you have not seen the painting. There's something in the frame that is a major part of the plot. And so it
Yeah.
totally makes sense to me that they would have to do that because if you had just your stereotypical canvas frame, it might not have looked so great. Because usually for me, whenever I have a pretty big painting, I always put the crossbars in the back of the canvas, and I feel like
Mm,
that wouldn't have looked so great on camera.
maybe. I don't know.
Anyway,
But
let's take another look at some images of the painting in the context because actually the size of it they said was very important, and Michael Taylor said that he struggled with the size because they had to
yeah.
have the painting small enough that they could actually put it under their arm and get out of the lady's mansion. And Michael Taylor said it actually frustrated him because a lot of his paintings are actually much larger than that, so for him it was a real technical challenge going on.
Right. But I think it's also a really good testament to see how professional Michael Taylor is overall, because if you read more about the process of making this painting, he would create the painting and he would also have different people of different sizes try to steal it from him to see how the painting would work under different like arm lengths apparently. And then he would like adjust his painting accordingly.
That is just the coolest thing. I mean,
Right?
that level of depth is so important. I feel like, here's the thing. You ever feel like you work on a painting and there's just so much like invisible work? Like,
Yeah.
especially, I feel like in your work, you do so much research to make
Mm.
sure that you're thinking about the environment and the people, and you're researching down to the cabinet that's in the living room in somebody's house in California. And I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people little details like that might pass them by. But
Mm.
something that one of my friends actually said to me, they're like, yeah, but it's like you can feel it in the painting.
Yeah.
Is that dippy? I don't know.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I think I said something earlier, not in this video, but in another critique video, where you do something with intent, and although people might not remark on it, they will notice it in some way or form. And just those small details really make a huge difference. And what would be worse if you didn't have those details. Like people might not say something when it's there, but when something's not there, people like clamor and riot and do like um be way more vocal about it. So I don't know, art is such a thankless job sometimes.
It absolutely is. And I feel like when things are flowing along, nobody really comments on it very much at all. And
Right.
I think actually, color wise, it's a really good painting as well, because actually, the
Mhm.
vast majority of the painting, it's almost all warm colors. And even the
Yeah.
warm colors that are in there, they're very close to each other. Like all those browns that are in the fur, they're not
Mm.
that far away in terms of value compared to the red drapery in the sleeve. But then he saves like this one spot of cool color for the apple. And the apple's such a
Mm.
pivotal part of that composition. So there's a lot of like super smart decisions going into the fundamental conceivement, is that a word,
Mm.
of the painting that I just, the more I look at the painting, the more I appreciate it. And I feel like that's what a really effective painting does, is that it grabs you right away and then slowly these little moments start to emerge and you start to really understand it more as an image.
Mm. I mean, speaking of little things to notice in this painting, there are a lot of like teeny tiny details in this painting. And it's kind of funny because in the movie, this painting just gets like not thrown around, but like grabbed around, transported, wrapped up, thrown.
It's kind of a
And
miracle it didn't get damaged, actually.
right, well, I mean, we don't know. It probably is damaged, but
But they hardly
um,
spent any effort to wrap it. Like in the movie, they just take like butcher paper and like
yeah,
tape it around. Like, dude, get some like bubble wrap or something.
one sheet of butcher paper too. And it's funny because it was like a really fancy maid and butler who was like, "Do you in French, like, do you want us to wrap it up?" And Gustav's like, "Yes." And he takes out one sheet of butcher paper and just wraps up this priceless painting. Anyways, but as I was saying, this is such a detailed painting, and it's a shame we don't get to look at it further in the movie, but we can do so in this crit. But they're like just all the stuff, like the paper tacked onto the wall, the apple that's like molding a little bit, also the Latin text. I don't know about you, Clara, but I tried forever to find out what that text meant, and I didn't get it in the
Yeah, I
end.
couldn't. There
Maybe I
was
should
no
have just used like,
mention about it online, and I don't read Latin, so sorry.
yeah, or maybe we could have just like Latin translated. Maybe somebody in the chat can do it for us.
Who knows Latin fluently and can translate that for us? Let's see.
Or you could just like read it and then Google it
That's true.
and then tell us what it says.
Ashley is saying the guy in the left hand corner had the same position. Oh, are you talking about a specific slide, Ashley? Sorry, I
Oh
don't know which
yeah,
image you're
I know
referencing.
which
But you know
image.
what? I would not put it past Wes Anderson to plant little things like that, because the thing is, I have always watched movies, but I feel like ever since I started editing tutorials for Art Prof, I watch movies really differently now. Like I really follow the camera movement, I think about the point of view and everything. And this is like a beautifully crafted movie. Like there's so many
Yeah,
wonderful decisions compositionally throughout the whole movie.
right. If anyone has not seen a Wes Anderson film before, I highly recommend you see at least one because they're just all very odd, but so beautifully well crafted as well. And the storyline is unique for every film. Like there's one called The Isle of Dogs, which I highly recommend.
Kat, what do you think about the little moment of linear perspective on the left hand side? You almost can't see it. You got to really,
Right.
really look carefully. And the thing is, the vanishing lines, which are the lines that go up and down, you could hardly see them and they're not that dramatic. Like oftentimes vanishing lines are like super crisscrossing through the composition, but I could imagine
Mm.
if you're looking at this painting and not looking super hard for it, you could totally miss that linear perspective. So do you think it
Yeah.
works as a subtle hint of linear perspective, or do you think you should just get rid of it?
I think it works. It's just like a little bit odd that it's just a slight bit there, but I think it still works in terms of like, well, old Dutch paintings are a little bit odd in some way or form. And I think it's a really smart idea that the vanishing point, like if you traced all those lines back and connected them onto the point, they all point to the boy.
Mhm.
Like the lines pointing towards the boy, the focal point, is such a subtle detail, but it's such an effective way to help draw the eye towards the main character.
I mean, one thing that I do wish was maybe a little bit more pronounced, like for example, if you look at this weird Lucas Cranach the Elder painting, like Judith and Hollifer's, she looks like she's holding like a party favor that just happens to be a decapitated. I mean, doesn't she look like super festive? Like she's wearing this like really pretty hat and like very
Yeah.
bright clothing. But I feel like what this painting does have is there's a little bit more depth. And I do feel like in the Michael Taylor image, the area where the wall on the left touches the edge of the drapery in the back, I feel like that
Yeah.
really like closes off that space. Like I wish I could feel as I looked at the painting that I could walk around that drape. Like, dude, just channel Vermeer. Just a little bit. Give us
Right.
a little bit more depth.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I think this painting would benefit from a little bit more depth.
And actually, one other area, because, right, we got to critique something,
Yeah.
is I do want a little bit more of the chair. Because the chair, especially for me in the lower right hand corner, it gets a little smushed. And I feel like if you were to just zoom out a little bit more, that might also help with the depth as well, because it's just a little bit too
Yeah.
packed for me.
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, I think it being packed is on purpose, but I can definitely see that it would be a I think it would be a very different painting if there was more depth and it was a little bit more zoomed out. That being said, I don't think it's like a wrong or right decision. It's just a decision that could be a different route for next time for this artist. We're critiquing Michael Taylor. Oh my gosh.
Well, I feel like that's a good point that sometimes I feel like in our critiques, we're talking about, well, look, this area is problematic. It's getting in the way
Yeah.
of the message coming across. I feel like with this painting, we're not really doing that. I feel like we're just saying,
Yeah.
hey, here's another option. Here's another feature that maybe you could push a little bit more stylistically. But in a lot of ways, I mean, compared to a lot of the other artwork that I've seen in movies, like this is such an elegant, beautifully rendered and executed piece. I don't know that we're going to critique another piece that's this sophisticated in another
Yeah.
movie. I don't know if that's a competitor.
Enjoy it while it lasts, Clara.
What?
Enjoy it while it
That's
lasts.
true. I mean, actually, at the end of the month, Jordan and I are going to critique this horrible painting that's in Back to the Future too, of that
Oh,
obnoxious character Biff, where he honestly he looks like Donald Trump in that painting. So that should
wow.
be a lot of fun.
That'll set the tone. But
Exactly.
I don't know, like I think it's really good to have this crit of this like amazing painting because if you have a great piece of artwork, when you have a critique, it's not going to be a dead end. There are still options out there to explore, and it's very useful to still have people critique your painting even if you think it's perfect. You might see options that you didn't see earlier. So always critique. Critique is always a good
Well,
thing, no matter what kind of artwork you bring
and
in.
I think that's what critique does is that ideally you want a critique that talks about anything that's really getting in the way, but that you also talk about, well, here are some other options, because I feel like that for me has been a major role in critique is that it just gets you to see other ways you can do things so that you don't feel so limited when you look at the work. You don't feel, oh, that's the only way I can talk about that. There's no other way. So I feel like that's a really great part of that. We hope you guys will explore some of our other movie critiques, and that if you want to grow as an artist, you will subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who keep us up and running. And thank you to those of you guys for your wonderful comments in the stream. We'll see you next time. Bye.